Hello everybody, and welcome to the August Melbourne AWS user group. I say it's August, it is August, right? I'm pretty sure I've been in September for like the last week, so I'm a bit off. So this is the 118th, I believe, Melbourne AWS user group. We've been at this for a while now, so I think many of you know how this works, so I won't hang around up here jabbering too long, and we'll kick straight in. Where's my button for the slides? There we go. Hey, look at that. It's even framed perfectly. That doesn't normally happen. Anyway, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS user group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We want to pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. As mentioned, we have a full night of things on for August. Still August, I'm going to keep repeating that. We have two presentations, but first, before I get into the presentations, we're doing the introductions bit right now. It shouldn't take 10 minutes, it should take 5 minutes, but so here we go. Then we have our regular news segment. I know keeping up with what's going on with AWS is basically impossible, so we ask for 2 volunteers to try and digest it and regurgitate it back out in something that actually makes sense to all of us. I don't envy them at all because that's a terrifying job. But they'll get up here and they'll talk about what's new in AWS, and more importantly, what's actually probably important out of what's new, not just the data model changes on some random service. Then we have 2 presentations tonight. Scott's up first, talking to us about performance tuning .NET Lambdas. And then Ian, who is one of my co-organizers, will come up second, and talking notifications and reports for CloudFormation. So it should be 2 good presentations tonight. If you're not familiar with the AWS leveling system there, 300 is just, we're diving deep into specific services and not introductory level stuff. So it should be a good night. Before we wrap up, we'll have our marketplace segment. So if you are looking for work or looking to hire people, this is the spot for you. We'll do that right before we close so that you have a chance to mingle. I feel like I'm missing a slide there, but that's all right. Format for the night, please wait until the end of the presentations before you raise your hand to ask questions. If you're watching from home online, I'll keep an eye on the YouTube, Slack, the YouTube and Slack channels, and ask those questions on your behalf. But yeah, we leave the questions to the end so we don't interrupt the speaker. It just makes the night flow a little bit easier as well. I thought that slide goes before the other slide. Oh well, I'm off. So if you are watching from home, please, there's the 3 options there for asking questions. Most people seem to ask questions straight in the chat on YouTube, which is great because I monitor YouTube anyway. So if you do have any questions, pop them in there and then we'll ask them on your behalf. Just a reminder that all of our events are run under Community Code of Conduct. We want it to be a safe place, a respectable place for everybody in the community, regardless of anything that might set you apart from normal. If you do feel unsafe, you're more welcome to approach myself or Ian or one of the other organizers. If you don't feel safe approaching us either, there are anonymous feedback forms on the website, and you can view all that in detail at the link at the bottom there. We would be remiss if we didn't mention our sponsors. Our sponsors make this event possible. Without them, we wouldn't be able to have catering, to have the event space and that sort of stuff. So a big thank you to our gold sponsor, CMD. Come on, guys. And to our silver sponsors, Versant and Civo. And to NAB for providing this awesome venue as well. All right, I don't think I have too much more here. Yep, if you do want to connect with the community, our Slack team is a great way to do that. There's about 900 or so people on there, active at various times of the day. Don't worry, the URL will appear regularly throughout the night if you miss it. But but yeah, it's a great place to ask questions, to get involved with the community. Like if you're stumped on something or if you're learning something, if you want to talk jobs, there's a jobs channel, and there's also some bot channels that publish for outages and for announcements and stuff like that. It can get quite busy, obviously, during outage times, but otherwise it's still a pretty active place. There are other ways to get involved, though, and I forgot to ask if we have opened up for sponsorship yet, or if we're going to do that soon. Soon. If you are interested in sponsoring, watch this space, or come and find the handsome gentleman with his hand up in the front here. Sponsoring is not the only way. We always looking for volunteers to help run these events. Like there's lots of little jobs to do every month. There's big jobs, small jobs, all sorts of jobs. But the one that we're always looking for the most is speakers. Finding speakers for these events is the hardest part of putting these events on. So if there is something you like, if you're on the fence, maybe you would like to think about presenting something, come and have a chat to us. We're more than happy to help mentor you through the process. Help you find a topic, review slides, whatever might help you make more comfortable doing that. And there's actually, normally this is where I go into what else is happening in the AWS community over the next month, but nobody has anything booked for September so far. So with nothing else to talk about, I'll hand over to Matt and to Jason to talk news.
You wanted there for a second.
I was worried too. Just hold it down.
Okay, so time for the What's New segment. Starting off like we do every month without a heading for some reason. So can you tell I did the slide pack this month?
Finally.
Yeah,
Finally coming to Sydney.
What's new in Sydney? We have new instance types. Surprise, surprise. And you've heard me rail on this before, but instance naming is starting to get a little out of hand. Anyway, that instance type is now in Sydney. For those of you who haven't heard of U-3TB1, yeah, that's a server with 3 terabytes of RAM. It is the smallest of their new high-capacity servers for things like SAP HANA workloads and those sorts of things. If you're curious, they are $32 and change US an hour. So feel free to have as many of them as you like.
Don't forget to turn them off.
Yeah. Well, actually, you probably don't want to turn them off because in-memory database and
when you're not using them. This one? Yeah. Amazon TimeStream. This was one that caught me. I thought it would have been in Sydney by now. It's been a couple of years, but yeah, finally in Sydney.
So, anybody using TimeStream? No? Another one of those database services that, yep.
Maybe that's why.
Yep. So, well, maybe you can all start using it now that it's in Sydney. Yep. Oh, sorry. Cool. Also, new RDS instances for Microsoft SQL, M6i, R6i, R5b. These are just the next generation of the new instance sizes for anybody using Microsoft SQL. Probably not that many people. Moving on into serverless. Big serverless announcement for this month was the announcement of tiered Lambda pricing. If you are using Lambda a lot, and by that we mean
a lot,
you can now get discounts on your usage. They're not big discounts, but I guess when you times it by 15 million, anything becomes a big number.
Yeah, and the rest of the support for X-Ray, that'll be interesting to see in the GovCloud. Interesting to see when it comes to Sydney.
And then the only other one in sort of the serverless space was a pretty quiet serverless month this month. Was the support for MSK and self-managed Kafka consumer group IDs. This is useful for anybody doing disaster recovery and failover scenarios for your Kafka workloads. Gives you the ability to handle how Lambdas register themselves as a consumer group within Kafka. Again, fairly specific use case, but when you get to that sort of DR thing, it removes a lot of the pain of setting up that failover configuration. Next one is containers, and it was
all EKS.
All EKS this month.
We could probably headline that with what was that? Gleaming the Cube.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stop the jokes. Lots of
Kubernetes stuff.
Yeah, which one was the wildcard support for EKS Fargate failover selectors. Interesting way to expand their limits without actually expanding
the limits. Yeah, a little bit. Also, some new functionality to EKS Anywhere. Not sure anybody, my position when it comes to EKS and EKS Anywhere. It shouldn't be used anywhere.
Cost allocation tagging for the class levels.
Congratulations! You can now cost allocate your EKS at the cluster level. So. You now officially have almost functionality parity with, all your other cloud compute. And then the EKS and EKS distro now supporting Kubernetes 23. There is a little bit of a nuance in the 23 release. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, Kubernetes is dropping Docker support in 1.24. So if you're running Kubernetes, you've got to be aware of that. I haven't had a chance to look, but there was talk that Amazon was going to remove it in the 23 release. I'm not sure if that ever came in, but I would be validating that in a test environment before I did my upgrade. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah.
Databases had a pretty big month this month. Lot of quality of life things. There were actually more than just what's on this list, but they're all congratulations, new versions of Postgres in these instances and new versions of Postgres in those instances. Basically, we're now, you're able to run the current versions of 11, the current versions of 12 on all of your different instance types, including Aurora Serverless v1. Now supports Postgres 11.
Yep.
Yay.
Yeah. And bulk imports for the DynamoDB tables from S3.
Yeah, that was the big takeaway for me. And then the other one was MySQL support enforcement of SSL and TLS connections.
So the RDS supporting that, the one-click connectivity, interesting for those that are sort of just getting in and testing things. Ideally, you'd want to have that in code if you're, but it's for people that are starting out.
Sandbox.
Sandbox.
Yeah, I was looking at this one. For those of you who haven't already done what we've done and read through each individual announcement and know the detail behind them, this now gives you the ability when you deploy an RDS instance through the management console to have it automatically configure the security groups, the routing tables, the VPC and all of those sorts of things so that you've got that network connectivity from your RDS instance to your EC2 instance rather than having to do it all yourself. It's nothing you can't do, it's just it takes away all of that heavy lifting. Now, as Jason was saying, in a production environment, it's all going to be CloudFormation or Terraform or CDK anyway.
Codified.
So this isn't really a thing. But yeah, if you're just wanting to stand something up very quickly in a sandbox environment to just validate something, it might be useful. It feels there's been a few changes or a few new features AWS have added in recent that's trying to remove a lot of that behind the scenes guff of getting you from zero to working. So you don't quite need to dive into all the minutiae that you normally do when you get a brand new empty AWS account.
Yeah, so it's probably one of those that's sort of a bit like, it's great if you don't really know what you're doing, but it means that you don't really have to know what you're doing. So
yeah, I can see I'll use this next time I need an RDS instance for a presentation. That's the use case for me.
Yep.
And then the other one there, RDS SQL support for email subscriptions for SSRS. So anybody using SSRS in their RDS, that's a little bit of a mouthful, in their RDS deployment, now supports email subscriptions for your SSRS jobs. Again, yeah, great, but would have been nice a couple of years ago. Moving on to Dev and Ops.
Yeah, CloudWatch metrics, throughput increases. So if you're doing stuff with lots of CloudWatch monitors,
Lots of CloudWatch.
lots. Yeah, so you can now monitor everything and actually capture that. So that's always good to have more info on what's going on. So that's great.
The other was CloudWatch evidently support for creating custom customer segments. So this is really handy. If we think back, was it February or March that we were at Mantel and we had the presentation on observability? March. So yeah, if we think back to March's session, we had a deep dive on all of the different components of CloudWatch, and evidently is one of those bits that sort of gets overlooked a lot in CloudWatch land, but it's really useful for your feature flagging and deployment controls and all of those sorts of things. So the ability to create target customer segments gives you the ability to sort of fine-tune who's going to get what components of your release and how you manage the logs and data coming back.
The couple of other ones that picked up for me. So EventBridge supporting events now coming from GitHub, Stripe, and Twilio. So that's cool. If you're using those services, you can trigger off your events from there. And designated account support for Compute Optimizer. Just in general, I like having designated account support for things. So that's cool, being able to have your central account for your Compute Optimizer, your Guard Duty, your Security Hub, all those things off in their own separate. I like that.
And then the last one was cost anomaly detection, simplified interface for anomaly exploration. Cost anomaly detection, again, one of those things that I haven't seen used about as much as it probably should, but it's starting to get a nice feature set around just being that passive view into your environment when you get those, oh, where did that come from moment. That type of service where you turn it on and 11 and a half months of the year you forget that it's there and wonder whether or not you should stop paying for it, and then you get that one moment where it's kind of like, oh, I'm glad I had that there. So greater simplicity and visibility into that is always a good thing.
Yep.
Security, another big one for the month. The big one for me, CIS benchmarks for Bottle Rocket now available. Anybody running compliance workloads or highly regulated workloads, CIS benchmark won't be anything new. Having that in Bottle Rocket is a big win.
Yeah, and I like the config rule support using CFN Guard. So easier way to write your own config rules. So rather than having to go out and write lambdas and stuff, you can utilize CFN Guard to generate those custom rules for you.
The other big one of note there was CloudFront support for HTTP 3. Not sure, is there anybody using HTTP 3, looking to use HTTP 3? No. Again, it's one of those things, it's nice to know that it's there if I need it, when I need it, but probably not yet.
Yeah, and the origin access control for CloudFront, just adds a little bit more control over origin access identity. So
yeah, more configuration for CloudFront.
Yeah.
Yay! And then the obligatory config now supports more things line. Because that's basically, it's either, I think every month we pretty much have a line that either says config now supports more things or security hub supports more things.
Which actually that's leading into the launches, the announcements notification topic, for anyone that doesn't just subscribe to the what's new RSS. That's a different way to get your security updates.
To get your updates. If you don't want to listen to us every month.
Yeah, listen to us, we're good.
And then the other cool stuff. The big one on this page was AWS Training and Certification announced the AWS Skills Builder subscriptions. AWS now does their own training platform, I guess. Linux Academy and Cloud Guru eat your heart out. You can now pay AWS directly to teach you how to use AWS. Only going to cost you 29 smackers a month.
Yeah, which it's not quite up to the standard of your A-Clouds or others, but
nope.
We get that as an AWS partner, and I've used stuff from there. It's been okay. So
the one nice thing that the Skills Builder subscription, so I've dived in and had a little bit of a look at it. If any of you have done Amazon game days or anything like that, it's that level of rigor when it comes to the quizzes and the demos and the workshops. They've put a lot of effort into making sure that they're very fleshed out and well thought through. So from that perspective, it's probably got a lot of value, but from the content side and actually wanting to learn things, it's almost as if AWS only wants to tell you the good side of AWS services and doesn't want to, let you know that things don't actually always work the way that you think they might.
Surprising.
Let's just say that Cloud Guru and Linux Academy and, Shoot Dojo and all the others, they won't be going anywhere anytime soon.
What was the one that I saw? Yeah, the AWS support, launching support for managing cases in Slack. Some of the Slack integration pieces, I'm on the fence with. I'm not sure that you should be able to, manage a whole bunch of stuff just through a Slack channel. But I think this one's a cool one. If you're doing a lot with Slack, you can raise your support cases and manage them through Slack, which I think is, a nice handy one.
I guess that means that I can get my chatbot to talk to their chatbot and live in perpetual. Yeah, they can just enjoy each other's company. The big one for me, not that I think we'll see it in Australia anytime soon. Actually, there's two here that I don't think we'll see in Australia anytime soon. Private 5G. You can now get your very own 5G cell site from AWS. You give them a bunch of money, and it's not unreasonable. From memory, I think it was only 4 figures. They will actually mail you a 5G femtocell that you can set up and give you a bunch of SIM cards, and you have your own private 5G network. only available in the US, only, with a whole bunch of other caveats. But it is there. It is available. I don't think we'll be seeing it in Australia anytime soon. And that goes the same for customers can now pay upfront or on scheduled payments using AWS IQ. For those of you who don't know, there are other parts of the world where smart AWS people can sell their services through the AWS Management Console.
I was going to use something else other than services. Started with S, but that's all good.
So this is not something that you can consume AWS IQ services in Australia, but you can't sell AWS IQ services yet. You need to be registered in the US or Japan or parts of Europe or a few other places. But yes, if you do engage with any IQ experts, you can now pay all upfront or on scheduled payments. It is, however, a per IQ engagement thing. So you've got to negotiate that with each individual person before you commence the engagement for that to work. And then last but not least, because I'm presenting a few things about Amazon Connect, because I like Connect. I'm one of like 3 people on planet Earth that do. Schedule adherence now available in preview. So you can set up schedules for your agents so that they know when they should and shouldn't be on the phones. Connect can now tell you whether or not they actually did that. Would have been something I would have thought that a scheduling system would have been able to tell me previously, but apparently not. The other one is that same scheduling and capacity planning tool, you can now actually tell it what days of the week you operate. Before, it assumed you just worked 7 days a week because you're a contact center. Now you can actually turn around and say, no, I actually only work Monday to Friday. Again, one of those things that I would have thought would have been in a capacity planning tool from the outset, but again, this is why I'm not a contact center expert.
And especially when Connect is actually pretty good for smaller sites that can get an enterprise grade without.
I have said it before, and I will continue to say it. CloudFormation support, right? Just putting it out there. You have this service that would allow me to do this automatically. Really nice if we could use it.
For more about what Matt has to say on Amazon Connect, go to see our previous videos. They're quite interesting. There are many, yeah. Thank you very much, guys.
No worries.
Press and hold to turn it off. Come on up. Let's get you plugged in. All right, well, Scott's just giving that up. So Scott, if you haven't met Scott before, he's an AWS ambassador and a passionate developer. And I love to see developers up here talking because there's too many DevOps people and not enough actual developers. So Scott loves the agility and scalability of developing on the public cloud. He mainly focuses on developing serverless applications in .NET, but he's also very enthusiastic about DevOps and helping teams become more productive. Retract my endorsement. Cool. All right, so I've got your thing here. If you start that. Yep, I'll bring it up there in a sec.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you. A little bit about myself. So I've been hacking code for 25 years. It goes quickly when you say it fast. Fun fact, when I first started my career, I kept saying, I give myself 5 years in this industry, then I've just got to get out. Because, it's just so much to learn, so much to keep up with. I just can't keep that pace up forever. After 15 years, I eventually convinced myself that I had to stop saying that. I'm both an AWS and a Telstra Purple ambassador. I'm holding out for an overseas posting next time. Maybe somewhere nice like Fiji or Vanuatu. We live in hope. In what constitutes my spare time, I'm an avid Argentinian tango dancer. I've been doing that for just over 20 years as well. I even tried to set up my own tango school called Tango Duende. Let's just say it was a financial failure, which kind of speaks more to my business acumen than anything else. Still, I ended up falling in love with one of my students, and let's just say we have a saying in our household: never trust a tango teacher. Words to live by. So, my talk tonight. Well, let's talk about the goal of my talk. So, firstly, I want to do a bit of a deep dive into some of the challenges around .NET, and particularly cold start, because that's where it gets the most flack. Then I kind of want to try and convince you that these issues can actually be overcome. I want to then sort of show you where .NET really shines, and maybe discuss some other performance hacks that you can do. And finally, the ultimate goal of this talk is actually to convince Arjen that C# is the best language to write code in. So he set me that challenge. So yeah. Anyway, so the story kicks off about 4 years ago. I was doing some Git training actually for a client, and they told me that they decided to retrain their entire development team from being C#.NET to being Python because of the unacceptable cold start of the .NET Core 2.1 framework on Lambda. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. To be honest, I didn't have a lot of data to go on at the time. I hadn't done any Lambdas on .NET Lambdas on AWS. I had actually done a serverless application already on Azure using Azure Functions, using .NET Full Framework. And I had noticed that the cold start there was kind of problematic. But I had this sneaky little hack, which I'm far too embarrassed to talk about in front of people who would know better. And it's a hack that actually only works on Azure. It doesn't work so well on AWS because of the concurrency, the difference in concurrency models. So I couldn't really counter their decision. I couldn't really talk to them about it. So it started me on this journey to try and understand what the real problem was here. So I did a bit of research, and let's just say I found out that .NET Cold Start kind of sucks. I mean, it's better than Java, but that's not saying much, really. It's like 10 times worse than Python. Yeah. Okay. We got a problem. So just a little bit of background on this analysis that I'm showing here. This comes from a blog by a guy called Alexandra Felichkin. And it's actually, I've seen a lot of analysis of cold start times. Now, I like this one because it's non-trivial. I've seen a lot where, they set up every Lambda to just return hello world, which is like, okay. Yes, it tells you a bit about the cold start time, but it's not a realistic Lambda. It's doing nothing. So I like this one because at least you've got to include some SDK components, and you're actually writing to Dynamo. So it's a little bit more. It gives you a bit more insight than some other analyses that I've seen. So let's just take a quick look at what cold start is. So first of all, when you start a Lambda, regardless of the platform, first you've got to download your code, so your binaries or your script, whatever, into a container, and then start the container. And that's all AWS's responsibility to actually do that. Now you can have a little bit of sway here. The bigger your download package is, potentially slower it's going to be. Now I've done a little bit of research around this, and I've found there's not a huge amount of difference, between different sizes of packages. What's more important is probably what comes next, and that's the bootstrapping of the runtime and then the actual execution of your code. And in the other frameworks, apart from .NET and Java, in the other languages, that's pretty much all you got to worry about. In .NET, well, see, .NET is a compiled language, but it's compiled into a common intermediate language, which is platform independent, but then requires compiling at runtime. This is what we call JIT compilation, or just-in-time compilation. And just-in-time compilation happens literally as you're about to execute the code. It only happens the first time because it just stores that in memory, and once your compilation is stored in memory, it doesn't need to re-JIT it. As soon as I understood this and realized that was the problem, I suddenly had this oh crap moment. Because I'm like, that means we've probably got another problem. Because JIT compilation happens on a per method basis. And it makes sense because, if you're not going to execute, your entire code base in one call, then why bother JIT compiling it all? Because it's just a waste of time. But what that means is that we have this thing called what I've termed a lukewarm start. So let's say you have 2 branches in your code base. And so in this if statement, we go down one path when we first enter, because that evaluates to true. And then a little bit later, we go down a different path because it evaluates to false. Now, 2 branches in a code base is kind of not much, really, is it? So I set about trying to put some numbers around this, and I literally coded this in a Lambda, and lo and behold, this is what you get. So your cold start is kind of about 5 seconds. You can see the initialization here. That's the AWS bit where it takes your binary and loads it into a container and starts a container. And then the rest is this invocation, which is predominantly JIT compilation in this scenario. And then, so the way I did this was I wrapped that loop in that previous, let me just go back to that slide. I wrapped that in a step function which called the first path 50 times and then the second path 50 times. And when it hits that second path, you get this, where we don't have an initialization, but we still have 1.1 seconds. It's like, ooh, that's not great. And especially if you look at the 95th percentile, which I'm kind of using here as a proxy for the warm start time, it's 116 milliseconds. So that's 10 times greater than the warm start. So that's still a bit of a problem. And I kind of had a bit more sympathy for this company that had just retrained all their developers in Python and gone down that route. But except for the fact that, well, we'll get onto that in a minute. So let's have a look at the quick recap on my goals here. So deep dive into the challenges of .NET Cold Start. Well, I think I've done that and more. Convince you that these issues can be overcome. I think I've gone backwards on that one. It's actually worse than what most people make it out to be. So what am I missing here? Well, actually, what I'm missing is the knowledge that JIT compilation actually happens on a background thread. So we're introducing, as soon as you have a .NET application running, you're talking a multi-threaded application, and threading kind of requires CPU to work well, right? All of the analysis that I've shown you up to date was done on a 256 megabyte Lambda, because that's the default you get if you use SAM or if you use the .NET Lambda tooling. It gives you a 256 megabyte Lambda, which may well be an acceptable default for Python or Node or something else, but maybe it's not the right choice for .NET. Of course, if you increase memory, you increase CPU because they're linked. That's the only thing you can select in a Lambda is your memory. Of course, so more CPU. Hopefully, we're going to get faster JIT compilation, smaller cold start, and smaller lukewarm start time. So, well, let's experiment with the memory. And as you can see, if you go backwards, if you go to 128 meg, yeah, you pay for it. It's now up to almost 10 seconds. Interesting point, in fact, if you try and run Java on a 128 meg Lambda, it kind of errors out. You can't do it. But you'll notice that as we double the memory size, we halve the cold start size time, and this is just the invocation time. This is not looking at the initialization. So what you see is around this 2 gig mark, you start to not get any more benefit. And I've seen some other analyses that have been done on what kind of time slices in the CPU you're getting with respect to Lambda. And it's about this point here between 1 and 2 gig that you actually start to get multiple CPUs, like more than one CPU as far as time slice goes. So that kind of starts to make sense. And if you're thinking of backing a single page web application in front of an API hosted in Lambda, all of a sudden the cold start is now down under a second. So that's doable now. That's actually quite doable. And the lukewarm start actually follows the same basic pattern. So it literally halves up until this point here. Now, of course, you might say, well, increasing the memory also increases the cost, but it's memory times time. So essentially, you're not increasing cost at all until you get to about 2 gig, at least for cold starts. We'll talk about warm starts in a minute. So how does that compare with other languages? Well, this is for 1 gig, and all of a sudden we can see, Java's still problematic. But .NET is now only 3 times as bad as Python. We're getting there. We're getting much better. And if you go the whole hog and shove 10 gig at it, you're down to half of what Python and Node are. Twice of what Python and Node are. And of course, you wouldn't throw 10 gig at it. You're not getting much more benefit. But it seems as though Python and Node don't have the same improvements as you increase the memory. Now, the interesting thing is we can actually do even better than this. As of .NET 3.1, they introduced this concept called ready to run. And what ready to run does is it JIT compiles, or pre-JIT compiles your code into assembly. You've got to target a platform, obviously, but it pre-JITs it so that your actual assembly is bigger. It's like 3 to 4 times bigger, but it's in machine code. Or there's a caveat here. It compiles as much as it can, because some things can't be JIT compiled until you're in the runtime. So it JIT compiles as much as it can, and you can see here you get about a 33% increase in performance. So now we're starting to compete with the Nodes and the Pythons. And lukewarm time does the exact same thing when you use ready to run. We can actually do even better than that. There's this really cool blog post by Zach Charles who claims you can get up to 10 times the cold start performance improvement by creating a custom Lambda runtime, ready to run plus self-contained deployment. and he's got a Git repository there you can look at, and you can download the code. This was done on 3.1. This was done back in 2019. So, but it now blows away the competition. But there's a price. It's a custom Lambda runtime. You've got to do a lot of things yourself. .NET 6 incidentally introduced this idea called trimmed self-contained .NET deployments, which make the actual deployment size even smaller. It cuts out a whole heap of stuff that you don't actually use. So yeah, you can do some really cool stuff, and you can get that cold start time down to blow away any other platform. Well, most other platforms. So why don't we do this all the time? Well, there's a cost here. When you pre-JIT something, it can't make certain optimizations. It's got to be very generic about the code that it produces, so you don't actually get the best performing code. Turns out JIT compilation is actually .NET's superpower. If you use JIT compilation from .NET 2.1 onwards, they introduced this idea called tiered compilation. It wasn't switched on by default in .NET 2.1, but it is now. And that is, the way it works is that when you first run your application, it does a tier 0 compilation, JIT compilation, and that does the fastest possible compilation it can possibly do to get you executing your code. But it also does some analysis of what it's produced. And then as you keep calling your code, it looks for hot paths, and it very deliberately targets your hot paths and figures out really intense optimizations that it can do on that. Things like inlining functions, or devirtualizing method calls, and things like that, or even structuring the compiled machine code so that the hot path is actually at the top, so you get more L2 case usage. Things like really clever things like that actually make the warm start unbelievably fast. And this is where, if you look at the same analysis by Alexandra Felichkin, you can see .NET is competing with Rust and Go. And this Rust one is, incidentally, a custom runtime. Go is obviously the standard Go Lambda, but it's competing with them, and it's twice as fast as Python, 3 times as fast as Node. So, and then one thing that I personally did, and I need to get around to publishing this properly, but I did a little bit of analysis on CPU-bound workloads by creating essentially a Mandelbrot generator, which is heavily CPU-bound. I found it to be about 16 times faster on CPU-bound workloads than Python. So, if you want to stick with Python, Ian, and you want to pollute the planet by, having 16 times the CPU cycles that you need, be my guest. Sorry. Oh, you prefer Go. Okay. Well. Okay. But yeah, it's super fast for CPU bound tasks, and that was all done on .NET 3.1. .NET 6 has introduced a ton of performance improvements. There's about 550 pull requests into the repo between .NET 5 and .NET 6 dedicated to performance. Many of them are to do with that tiered compilation and finding little improvements in that second tier of compilation. It's got much better garbage collection. There's improvements in the basic system types. So, the types that every application has to use. So that's good. Improvements in file stream, especially on Linux, which is good for us. And improvements in networking and many, many more. And all of these you get for free just by upgrading to .NET 6. So I'd suggest if you've got a whole heap of .NET 2.1 or .NET 3.1 Lambdas, probably might be time to upgrade. There's another one that was specifically called out by AWS in their announcement of releasing .NET 6, and that is the JSON serializer source generation. Now, normally JSON serialization and deserialization is a reflection-based operation, which reflection can be quite time-consuming. But with the new improvements in .NET, you can actually generate generate the source at compile time and then have that compiled into code so that it's running as code and then optimized by the JIT compiler. So there's a little bit of work you got to do there, not much, but definitely worth doing that. So what's my advice? Well, firstly, I'd say know your workload and know your non-functional requirements. Do you need to optimize for cold start? If not, make sure you're optimizing for warm start. If you do need to optimize for cold start, we have ways of dealing with that. So, for instance, if you're using a rarely used API, like say you've got 600 users or something, and they log in a couple of times a day, they hit an API, you're probably going to get a lot of cold starts. So you might want to optimize for that. So use ready to run, compile your binaries as ready to run, and give it 2 gig of memory. CPU bound, make sure you don't compile ready to run. Let the JIT compiler do its magic. If it's I/O bound, I had an interesting Lambda recently where it was just calling a stored procedure in MySQL, and the stored procedure was taking 15 to 20 seconds. I'm not going to throw 2 gig at that. I don't care about 5-second start time at that point. I'll give that 256 meg, and I'll because it doesn't matter what I do, I'm not going to get any better performance out of that. Use threads if you can. If you're giving it 2 gig or more, then you've got CPUs at your disposal, and if you can make concurrent calls to get to I/O bound calls that you can get data back from and process independently, use it. It will save you money. The other thing, and this is key, 95% of all performance issues that I've ever seen anywhere have nothing to do with the platform or the choice of language. It's to do with bad programming practices. Things like n+1 queries or loading the world into to get a little bit of data, or doing really bad things in a tight loop. Fix those problems. Concentrate on those problems. A few other considerations. Some of the choices you make in the SDK. So, for instance, if you look closely at this is my lukewarm start here. This is on a 2 gig Lambda. You'll see that there's a described table here. And that's because I deliberately used the DynamoDB object persistence model, which is a great little tool for taking your .NET types and persisting them or reading them to and from a DynamoDB table. It comes at a cost. The cost is only a one-off. It's only done the first time you execute a path that requires the object persistence model, but it needs to do a described table. If you just use put item and get item, you don't get that. The other interesting thing, of course, memory and network are also interrelated with in Lambda. You'll see that this described table takes about 53 milliseconds here. In one gig, it takes 100 milliseconds. So, if you're doing a lot of I/O, you might want to check, increase the memory just to get better I/O, to get better networking. The other thing to note is the cold start CPU burst. You get about a 10-second CPU burst at Lambda initialization time, specifically to set yourself up for success for warm starts. So do all those things that you need to do to make sure that warm starts are fast. So, all right, final check-in on my goals. So I'm guessing, I've done a deep dive into that. I hope I've convinced you that these issues can be overcome. I hope I've shown you that .NET can really shine and does, for certain workloads, is really good. Discuss some other performance hacks, did that. And have I proven to Ian that he should learn C#? I'm guessing not. But to be honest, that wasn't really the point. My point is that if you're a .NET developer, if you've got a good team of .NET developers, there's no reason you shouldn't be writing .NET on Lambda. It's a perfectly good. It's got some great features, and it shines in warm start, and all the cold start problems can be dealt with. Some further reading there, but pretty much that's me. Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, just wait and I'll come around.
That was great. C# is an awesome language, but when comparing compiled languages and non-compiled languages, say comparing something like another compiled language to C#, say like Java, would you say that would have similar sort of issues?
So Java does have similar sorts of issues, only worse. As you could see from the analysis that there was, Java doesn't come down anywhere near as much when you throw CPU at it. And I'm not even sure why that is. The only thing I can think is that Java hasn't really had the same level of investment that .NET has. Microsoft have put a lot of effort into improving .NET, and I know Java has kind of been struggling in the wilderness for a while. Before C# came along, I was very excited about Java and was keen to start using it, but when .NET came along and I started coding in .NET, I kind of just forgot about Java. So yeah.
Cool, thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Anybody else have questions? Step back so I can see everyone. Yep.
Oh, this is going to be a hard one.
No. I'm your friend. Microsoft has a solution for this in the Azure Functions Premium plan, where you have pre-warmed instances. Do you think AWS is heading in a direction similar?
I hinted at this earlier. AWS has a very, very different concurrency model in Lambda to Azure Functions. And so my disgusting little hack that I did in my Azure Functions serverless app was that, with Azure Functions, you can create n different functions and you host them all in the same function app, right? And I just needed to call that, I needed to do something every 5 seconds. And so I had to call something every 5 seconds, and literally that kept it warm. Now, that doesn't work so well in AWS because Lambda has a completely different concurrency model where the Lambda, an individual Lambda is a complete compute environment as opposed to a function app which has multiple functions. A Lambda is a single CPU, compute environment. And if you call that Lambda And then while you're still calling that, another call comes in, it will spin up another instance. So you'll get another cold start. That's why that kind of thinking doesn't work in AWS. Now, there's an argument as to which way's the right model. Of course, we know the right answer. AWS is right. Yeah.
Good. Well done. Yes.
The ambassador chip's kind of firing. But that's why that pre-warming is probably not a solution that you want to look at it in AWS.
Cool. If there's no other questions. No.
All right. Thank you very
Scott.
much.
Do you actually want me to read what you put down as your bio? I think I have to.
I want to hear that now.
Yeah, I think I have to. All right. I'll step into the camera so people can see me. So, many rumors abound around Arjen's origin. Some say he was constructed out of pure silicon, and his coming heralds the end of the on-prem world. Others claim that he managed to turn his ability to say a lot of nonsense into a career as a principal consultant at CMD Solutions. Yeah, I'd say that one. Where he occasionally gets to write about himself in the third person. And yet others say that he's just full of hot air like every other ambassador. His 19-month-old daughter thinks of him as that convenient slave that reads me stories and gives me food. And people at the user group he runs probably think of him as that annoying guy who begs for speakers every month. Over to you, Arjen. I actually don't have you for some reason.
Oh, no.
I mean, I'll figure it out.
Technical difficulties. Must have been that Windows computer that was just plugged in. Oh. Hold on. No, it seems to have crashed. Let me see.
Technical difficulties slide. Just wait for that to reboot. Yeah, I can see you now.
Thank you. Thanks for voiceover. Cool. And it lost internet connection, so everything is. If it can see my phone, that would be great. Cool. This is a perfect sign for the upcoming live demo.
Hooray!
In the meantime, let's pretend none of that happened and we'll get started. Yeah, because we are not 3 years behind with editing the videos. Cool. Thank you all for coming and sticking around until this part of the evening. Scott, thank you for talking, and I'm sorry, not entirely convinced. But right now, talking about CloudFormation and EventBridge. Last month at the news section, I actually hinted that there was probably some fun stuff you can do with this. So let's have a look at what you can do with it. First, hi, I'm a principal consultant and AWS ambassador for CMD Solutions. We are great. Partner of the Year, best place to work in Australia, all that kind of stuff, according to the awards. I organized this meetup you may not have heard of. I say, check it out. It's really good. It's every last Wednesday of the month. I sort of do podcasts, including one for the meetup, which has not kind of been airing lately. That's going to get fixed. And I write on my blog, ignore me. As Rob said in his lovely intro, I'm also a father, so I actually don't have any free time. Because, well, that's how life goes. Anyway, on to the fun stuff. CloudFormation. I'm just going to go really quick through this part. CloudFormation, if you don't know it, it's a way to write your infrastructure as code. You do this in YAML, or technically it is still possible to do it in JSON, but only unnamed viewers of the live stream would actually hate themselves so much that they'd want to do that. Sorry, Chris, I'm not going to call you out by name. CDK. CDK is basically CloudFormation, but written in a programming language. So the most common language I see in use for this is TypeScript. Not quite sure why. Some people say that it's better than .NET. I'm not necessarily one of those people, but can find that out. And the last service then that I'm gonna actually, let's go back to CDK for one moment. Basically, CDK spits out CloudFormation templates that then get deployed. This is important for the rest of the talk, and that's why this is the last part. We'll actually talk about CDK, because the rest is all about what happens when CloudFormation actually gets deployed. So in that regard, there's no difference whether you write it as CDK or as CloudFormation. EventBridge then is a service from AWS that is basically designed to hook everything together. So here you can see a nice little diagram, but EventBridge, not sure how readable it is on the slide. That is very annoying. I probably should have created a diagram myself instead of being inspired by the AWS website. So basically, EventBridge is, as the name says, a bridge between services. So things go into EventBridge and that triggers something else. That can be something as simple as a cron schedule, which used to be done through CloudWatch events, but it has been incorporated into EventBridge. Or it can be API calls from different services. As was mentioned earlier in the news section, this includes things like GitHub now. So that's all cool. But then last month, AWS had this announcement. I'm not a big fan of the way AWS writes the titles for their announcements. This one sounds like before you reach the last word, you'd fall asleep. But AWS CloudFormation event notifications with EventBridge help you create event-driven applications. Right. Basically, CloudFormation calls EventBridge. Let's keep it simple. without all the marketing speak. That's all it does. It does so on 3 events. It goes on stack status changes. So when you deploy a stack, update a stack, delete a stack, any of those things trigger an event to EventBridge. Each stack change does this. So this happens both when you go from stack complete create complete to update in progress to rollback in progress to update failed. That's not the preferred path, but it is one of the things. And the same can be done for resource status changes. Personally, I'd say be careful with that one. There can be a lot of resource status changes that happen if you have a few templates in your account. The last one is drift detection status changes. Basically, you can do drift detection on CloudFormation, which then tells you there are changes in your CloudFormation, in your resources that were not created or managed through CloudFormation. So this theoretically allows you to detect that when you trigger a drift detection, which is an asynchronous process, now you can have that send a message, hey, can send something through EventBridge. EventBridge sees, hey, this is now status drift detected, and you get a message in your email or however you want to do it. I've had some issues with this one where it seems to recognize and send a message to EventBridge for every possible status except drift detected. I'm still not sure if that is my test cases or something else. So, but possibly keep an eye on it. How does this work? You basically set up an event pattern. The source is AWS CloudFormation. The detail type is CloudFormation stack status change. Yes, it's a ridiculous string. That is the way you would have to write it, because that's how it works. And then you can, in the detail part, you can set filters. So I only want to have notifications when these statuses happen. So this exact example here comes from a workshop I did. Basically, this triggers a notification the moment a stack goes into a rollback state. Why would you want to do this? Because after all, CloudFormation will already tell you when a stack fails. Now, actually, CloudFormation will tell you when a stack has failed and it's finished doing its rollback or things like that. I personally, and I'm sure many of you, have encountered lovely situations where, for example, you try to update a database. Especially if there's a magnetic disk involved, this can take an hour. It's much nicer to get a notification, hey, the rollback on this has started the moment that happens, instead of having to wait an hour before the rollback has completed. So that's why this kind of thing is easy. And then the way you simply do that is you have your CloudFormation, it triggers EventBridge, and that goes to SNS. And that sends you an email, and then you're happy. Well, probably not happy if it told you that something failed, but you know what I mean. But aside from that, why do hopefully we care about something like this? Well, have you ever heard any of these comments? CloudFormation is slow, now it rolled back, it's so hard to detect drift. When did this change? What is taking so long? There's a lot of complaints about CloudFormation, and the best way to deal with complaints, as Scott showed us earlier, is have some data to back it up. So about a year ago, I was standing, I would say it's standing here, but it was actually at home behind the screen because we were still unfortunately all remote. I gave a talk about a tool I wrote called Fog, just to to make your CloudFormation deployments easier. But then a while back, I got inspired by a tweet that basically showed a pretty diagram of a time lapse of a CloudFormation deployment. The tweet basically said, I had to do this all by hand, but it would be cool if this was built into AWS. So I built a tool for myself that actually creates those diagrams and then spits it out as either an HTML page or Markdown or the raw data as JSON, things like that. I built that into Fog, and it basically creates things like this, where you can clearly see, okay, this is how long things took, this is the service that's annoying. In this example, you don't see it, but that includes like different colors for, is this an update, is this a deletion, or things like that, which I think is kind of cool. And then this announcement came out, and I figured, I can use this as a demo to show what you can do with that. So I figured I can have CloudFormation trigger EventBridge, trigger a Lambda function that runs that for me, that then spits it out into an S3 bucket. Cool. Then I figured this can be multi-account. There's no reason to limit this to a single account. Nice. And then I thought, but if I have it in an S3 bucket, why don't I go just a tiny bit further and run another Lambda and have that build an Amplify site for me that shows me all of these deployments from all of my accounts. So I thought it was neat. Also think it's probably a bit more than most people would want to do. But let's have a look at what it then looks like. So as you can see here, I have very much used standard SAM templates, not even bothering changing the hello world function part. But if you look at this event pattern, it does all of these same things. So if it is a creation, update, deletion, rollback, import, all that stuff, it will trigger something. And in this case, it will trigger this Lambda function. That's cool. So let's have a look at that Lambda function. Unfortunately, this Lambda function is too large because to please Scott, I wrote it in Python by way of adding a binary of Fog and just calling that. It definitely did not have anything to do with me not having the time or being too lazy to build a Lambda wrapper around Fog itself. This is just because I felt like it. And maybe a little bit of the other side. Cool. So this then sends things to S3, which I realized I forgot to open beforehand. And if we then look at the bucket here, and just to be clear, yes, these accounts are going to be wiped. So this will send reports in here. All nice and exactly wanted. And that in turn, leave it here. Sometimes I need to look for stuff in the interface because I don't. Where is this stuff? Somewhere in here, and if I had remembered to look at it here, event notifications, if anything gets written, it will trigger a Lambda function, which is then this Lambda function here, which again is written in Python, which will call a amplify. This is the problem when the computer restarts and then everything that you had carefully prepared is no longer there. It will just trigger this amplify build and it works. So this is the site, but what is the fun in showing that without a quick demo? One moment. My SSO session survived the reboot, so that's good. Cool. So just doing a simple deployment here now of a VPC, just some basic stuff in there. When it's all big like this, it doesn't look very good. But yes, let's deploy that. And very soon, this will be deployed. I'll just leave it running because a lot of this stack actually is really fast until we hit amplify, at which point it takes a minute or two to actually run the deployment. So instead of boring you by watching a deployment, I'll have a quick look at what things look like here. So basically, we've got just some, let me see if I can make it a bit better. Yeah, can see the updates here. This is a very simple example where I just updated the SAM template that runs this for me. So just a single step. In the meantime, we've got our deployment here finished. So what this means is that by now, if we go back to the S3 bucket, actually, we can already see that Amplify is building the site. Site is very straightforward. I just used a Yugo site with basic templates. There's plenty of issues with the templates, but I built this for a demo, not for long term. So let me Actually, I think instead of showing this, I will just switch back to the presentation. While we wait for Amplify to finish building. And then I can show you an output that looks exactly the same as some of the others. But personally, I think it's really nice. So this is the example. Also, it shows whether or not something succeeded, which is always nice. And if you want to keep up to date, you've got an RSS feed, all that stuff to basically see all the deployments you're running. That's the website URL. If you want to have a look at it yourself, if you're going to look at it on your mobile, try portrait mode. Landscape mode. The table it doesn't scale very well. So what's next for this little project? Have the timestamps actually in a defined time zone because it's running on Lambda. I don't really need to know what time in UTC something was deployed because I don't live in England. Make an actual proper Lambda for Fog report. Put everything as infrastructure in code because some of this may potentially have been click work. Create a nice theme, all the usual stuff. But mostly what I wanted to show you is the possibilities of something like this. So yes, I'm quite happy with what I did with the Fog reports, but that's mostly for me. That might not be something you care about or are interested in. But what you are interested in probably is the ability to do this kind of thing. And that was my plan here, to show you with just a couple of steps, tiny Lambda functions in this case, held together with EventBridge and other automated triggers. I didn't have to do anything, but in the end, I've got a website that automatically updates anytime CloudFormation runs, which I think is pretty cool. So, pretty much on time. My website, the website of this user group. If you add /Slack, you'll find Slack. Twitter, GitHub. On GitHub, you can find the stuff I wrote for this, of the workshop, even the website itself. Let me see in the meantime. Deployment succeeded. So if we now go back here to home, we can see the user group VPC exists, and it is this routing here that took the longest, at least sort of. Luckily I picked something that didn't take ages to deploy, almost as if I prepared that part. And that's it. Thank you all. And
thank you, Ian. Does anyone have any questions for Ian? I have one. About how long did that take for you to put together?
Which part?
All of the parts.
The report.
Probably the stuff that's new since Fog.
The report building took quite a while initially. I had to figure out how to make the graph and things like that, because this uses Mermaid.js, which means I can put it into all kind of stuff that automatically renders it, like your VS Code, things like that. Several days, and the integration for EventBridge took longer than it usually would, because I had to write step-by-step documentation, because it was it was built for a workshop. Then the last bit, just hooking it up in Amplify and stuff like that, was quick, except for fighting with the theme of the website to make it look pretty. And I did not succeed in that part.
Yeah. So excluding the web bit, it was actually pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Does anybody else have questions?
Is everybody still awake?
I think everybody's full of the possibilities. We'll go
Excellent.
with that. Thanks, Ian.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, let's bring this to the end. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're at the home stretch here, the last little bits. First up, we have our marketplace segment. I'm a little bit loud there, I think, getting some feedback. Our marketplace segment is our attempt to connect people looking to hire AWS, people who work in AWS, and people looking to work in this field or to change jobs in this field, whatever the case might be. I guess just a show of hands, is there anybody that's hiring? Let's put my hand up. Got a few. Ian, is CMD hiring? Oh yeah? I forgot the logo. We usually start with some sponsors first. Matt, thanks. Contractual obligations, unfortunately.
Hey everyone, Bonjovic from CMD. I've actually spoken here before, but not in person, online. Basically, I don't shut up about CDK, and probably hear from me again. CMD, we're hiring everyone in AWS at the moment. We're especially looking for EUC experts, security, and cloud. So come say hi afterwards, give me a chat, poke me on LinkedIn, don't poke me in real life. And yeah, let's see what we can do for you. So reach out.
Cool.
So yeah, Toss for Purple are, well, so I can speak for my squad. We are looking for good developers, but beyond just my squad, we have infrastructure, we have workplace, we have a number of different portfolios, and we are definitely hiring, and definitely in Melbourne and beyond. So yeah, come speak to me if you are interested.
I think it was just that one gentleman there from before.
Hi guys, I'm 4 months in a row now. You're probably sick of hearing from me, but I'm actually a recruiter. I'll get the Microsoft joke out the way. I do Azure as well, if anyone's interested in that, but don't look at me like that. I actually recruit directly for AWS as well, but I'm here just, anything from small startups to bigger businesses, consultancies and end clients. I've worked with a few of you on just CV writing as well, and advice around marketing yourself, trying to get through all those LinkedIn messages that people like me send you. So yeah, feel free to ask any advice, no matter how small or big you think the question is. Yeah, always here to help, guys. All right.
Cool. I don't think there was anyone else. No, so if you are in the market or just interested in seeing what's out there, go have a chat to the 3 people that just spoke. You can do that right after this. This is why we do it at the end. In case you're curious, we don't ask people who are looking for work to put their hand up because your boss might be sitting right next to you and that gets a little bit awkward. All right, so let's wrap up. A big thank you to our 3 main sponsors, to CMD, to Versant, and to Civo. Thank you again for your ongoing support. A big thank you as well to our speakers tonight. And to everybody else who's helped set up and everything else. That's awesome. Thank you very much. Our next event is the 28th of September, last Wednesday of the month, same as always. We will see you then. Thank you all.